So, hello everyone, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing with Emma and Ruta. And in this week's episode, I can't believe we haven't actually done a budget episode before. I know we've talked a lot about marketing budget, but we haven't actually done one dedicated to it. So that's what we're going to do. We've got a very special guest, Jamie, who's from our sponsor Dealfront. So Jamie, over to you. Please tell us a bit more about yourself.
Jamie, like you said, Director of Content here at Dealfront. But yeah, background in B2B marketing for around 12 years now. So I've had my fair share of budgetary discussions / arguments / frustrations. So I think when we were discussing topics, this was one of the first ones that came to mind. So happy to chat all things budget.
Amazing. I'm personally really excited for this episode. So, but before we jump into budgets and talking about why they're bonkers, would you tell us your deepest, darkest marketing fuck?
This was my first role out of university. I worked for the Royal Mint, so the company who mints coins for the United Kingdom. And we used to do a trade show over in Beijing each year. And we had to ship product weeks ahead to get it to Beijing on time for us to sell it in China. And you can imagine the customs documentation for that was fairly lengthy and all in Chinese, which was great. So we would spend a good few days, if not weeks, prepping this paperwork. And I basically just got the calculations wrong. You not only had to put the recommended retail price of the product you were selling, so gold or silver coins, you also had to put the raw metal value. So each metal that's involved in a gold coin, which isn't just gold, it's got like copper in, it's got other sort of metals in. And you had to work all of those out per coin and then for the total amount you were taking. So it was a ridiculous amount of maths based on the makeup of each coin, and every single coin's a different makeup, etc., etc. So you can imagine it got pretty complicated. I got it wrong. We had a deadline. We basically just had to pull an all-nighter and do all the calculations again, and then fly out to Beijing the next day. So that was fun.
You know, when you hear stories like that and you think, why does that shit land in the lap of marketing? Why were you the one working out the cost of the metal in the coins? I know, like, it's our job to ship stuff for events, whatever, but come on, surely someone else should have been doing that.
It's an interesting one. So at the Mint, basically marketing would pitch a product to the business, and then you'd have a product marketer, product marketing manager sort of manage that through. We were just doing the trade events and choosing what products we were taking. So we had to check you would basically have like a bill of materials for every coin that was ever minted, and you had to check the bill of materials, look at the makeup of the coin, calculate how much of each precious metal or material was used, turn that into a raw value of that material at the point of sale, so that you could pay China enough tax based on what you had sold in the country. So it was one of those slope shoulder things of, okay, it's your trade show, you calculate what the coin's made of, basically.
Absolutely love that. So speaking of calculations and maths and budgets, great transition there, Ruta, pat on the back. I feel like everyone in B2B marketing has always felt like they didn't get quite the right budget. But where do you think it's going wrong? So is it founders and board members that are kind of thinking about things wrong? Is it marketers expecting too much or asking for too little? Where do you think that kind of first area of, what am I trying to say? Where do you think that first kind of hurdle comes when it comes to setting a budget?
I think if I was to summarize it at a very top level, I'd say lack of alignment, lack of education, and probably unrealistic expectations in terms of ROI. So in terms of alignment, I think depending on the how modern or mature a company is, you've got sales and marketing that sit in a revenue function, or you've got sales and marketing that sit in very, very different functions, and they argue over attribution and lead gen and all that sort of fun stuff. So I think the first thing that I would say on the whole, most companies get wrong is just lack of alignment between marketing, sales, and the overarching business goals. We're very, very fortunate at Dealfront that we have a company goal, and then you have objectives by team, OKRs that basically filter down, that all link to that original company goal. So you're all pointing in the same direction, you're all chasing the same thing. So lack of alignment. I think they underestimating the complexity of B2B marketing, I think, is another thing to factor in. I don't know what's the average B2B sales cycles now. It's like 4 to 6 months or something
Forever.
ridiculous, 270 odd. Oh, yeah, it's forever. Yeah, I'll be retired by the time some of these deals close. So it's, I think because they're longer and more complex than ever, I think boards founders, C-suite sometimes fail to realize that it's not just about that immediate lead gen, put out an ad and you get 5 leads, great, happy days. It's more about the building relationships and trust and value over a longer period, which I think the reason for that is probably because it's hard to measure trust and rapport and those relationships that you're building with clients in a digital world. And I think that sort of links to the mention of the ROI. So I think probably every single founder, C-suite of companies I've worked for over the past 12 years, bar Dealfront, I would say, focus far too much on the short-term ROI. So it's what can we do in the next 30 days to boost this, or what campaigns can you run in March, like a March campaign. Also, I do understand the benefit of having a focus campaign for a month. Maybe you cover a topic for a particular month. When you actually zoom out and think of it in terms of a much sort of bigger picture, I think this world of AI, like even more so, C-suite are just obsessed with this immediate ROI and like mass outbound, and we'll get 400,000 leads and convert them at whatever percent, and it's going to be sort of overnight. So I think, lack of alignment between marketing and the rest of the business.
I'm glad you mentioned the whole sales cycle thing, because one of my favorite things to do when I get asked or force myself upon someone to do their budgets is I like to basically look at their sales cycle and be like, so if in 2026 you want to make £1 million and your sales cycle is 6 months, guess what? That marketing budget has to kick in June of 2025 to actually make target for 26. And they're like, what? But like the budget has already been set. And I'm like, well, you've got a 6-month sales cycle. Like if you don't start doing that activity and spending on whatever you need to be spending on, like you're going to be 6 months behind by the time January comes. And like there's no way of catching up on that. So I'm glad you mentioned sales cycle. I don't know if you've kind of had those conversations as well.
Yeah, I think it's strange. You'd figure in a world that we're in that people would understand compounding interest, right? You have to put in a lot of work up front for things to snowball and eventually turn into the leads that you're looking for, and that takes time. And I think we obviously do throughout the year. You would do multiple iterations or multiple updates of like readjustments of budgets and things like that. But yeah, for sure, I think it's. They seem to think let's do it in November for January, and that's just when you do it, and it's just not the case.
That's just the sales cycle, right? Like that doesn't even include the bit that happens
anything
before.
Else.
You could probably add another 3 to 6 months on top of the kind of like marketing, if you want to call it marketing nurture or whatever else we get up to, like that. What that means before someone even just books a demo, people forget that as well. Ruta knows I'm very hot on the old velocity thing, and that you want to make sure that like you can do an event and a person can sit as an event lead for 400 days before they ever book a call, things like that. It's wild. And then you're like, oh yeah, but we did that event, why didn't we convert anybody? Like yeah, because it takes forever. So yeah, there's a lot of short-sightedness around that, and it makes our lives very difficult. So that comes on to us, and are we in fact actually part of the problem? I think we probably are at times. I think some marketers are not great at asking for what they need, and then I think when you go into the boardroom and you've got your seat at the table and people are grilling you and asking you why you want to spend money on things, I don't know that we're always very good at pushing back. So I don't know, Jamie, if that's been your experience and how you might think about countering that.
Yeah, I completely agree. It'd be naive of me to think that it's marketing aren't perhaps even 50%, maybe sometimes more, the issue in terms of asking for more budget and getting necessary budget. I think it's not necessarily a skill that you're kind of taught. Like I don't know, like in university, are they teaching like optimal budget requests and
Nope.
the best
Dude,
way to
I
get
didn't know
more
how
money.
to write an email when I left uni. It was fucking wild. And I did economics. It wasn't even like an artsy fartsy subject. I didn't know how to write an email that was like, like a sales email. Wild.
You don't necessarily go into a role knowing how to effectively pitch or correctly pitch for budget, and how you give a right to business case and all these formal things that you need to do. So, I mean, if it's your budget you're asking for, you need to sort of bear almost all of the responsibility for getting that budget.
What are some of the kind of, I guess, key things that you're thinking about when you are pitching for budget?
One of my favorite things is the education side of it. I sort of mentioned it in the last sort of talking point, but I think we wrongly assume sometimes that people know what we're talking about, the tactics that we're pitching, the strategies that we're looking to implement, and I think that's unfair. In the same way as I might sit there and listen to someone in sales and not have a clue what they're on about, or not have a clue about Salesforce campaigns and Salesforce build and things like that. So I think it's not just about informing them or just asking, it's about educating. So I think we need to educate people on the value of marketing. Marketing is, think about the last 12 to 24 months, how much marketing's changed in terms of like how much of a step forward it's taken. Like Chris Walker of Fine Labs was 3 or 4 years ago now. And since he sort of shared that initial wisdom, I think things have changed massively. But I think we need to make sure that we're putting as much effort into supplying data or into educating as much as just supplying data. So it explains to them how content and thought leadership works in the bigger digital ecosystem, and how brand positioning contributes, and how tone of voice can implement things. And I think education is a massive part of it. Over communicating, I think, works well. I think that could come across sort of negatively depending on how you take it. But I think sometimes, I'd say more often than not, C-suite are lacking information. Or founders or C-suite are lacking information. So I think if you overshare information, it kind of does two things. It shows you're on top of your data, you're on top of your reporting. But I think it's like that proactivity in communicating your working. Like imagine that back in the days when you were told show your workings in an exam, it's that whole thing of like, if you over communicate the whole thinking and strategy and planning, the scribbles on a piece of paper on a board, the Miro board you've got, whatever it is, I think over communicating can sometimes help. Gives a bit more confidence. We speak about building trust and rapport with people outside of the business, but it's exactly the same inside of the business. So over communicate, I think, is a good one. And then the last one's almost like a non-negotiable, right? It's to demonstrate the clear ROI. So one of the first things I did when I came into role, and I've done it at every other role, is build a reporting dashboard that shows what I'm doing as quickly as possible, because it's the easiest way to ask for more money, more people, more heads in the team. So I think in terms of, if I turn that into like a real world example, thinking about full funnel sort of tracking, like PQLs, the conversion of that to SQLs, the volume of SQLs, the conversion of that to close one, ARPA, ARR, etc., etc., etc. If you can show and link back everything you're doing to demonstrable ROI, they almost can't argue with you. If there's not a founder on this planet that's going to say no to having £3 back for every pound spent, as long as you can show that. So yeah, I think educate, over communicate, and then just be rock solid on demonstrating ROI.
And one of the things that's almost definitely going to be on the minds of some of our listeners, where they maybe don't have particularly invested CEOs or C-suite, is this inability sometimes to demonstrate ROI in the way that we're talking about it. Because for those of us who've got access to the data and who have got platforms that are able to do these sorts of things, we're able to do the maths, that's easy for us. For everyone else listening who is kind of like, how do I show ROI when I don't have access to some of this data? This is a bit on the spot, but is there anything you would suggest that those people could do that's slightly different? I know there are other metrics accessible to people. You can go into your Google Analytics and stuff like that. But is there anything else you can think of those people could do?
Yeah. Okay. In the realms of attribution, two things: put self-reported attribution on the website. That would be, it's not necessarily the most accurate thing as a standalone metric, but the where did you hear about us, or where did you see us, that sort of stuff. I implemented that at the last company I was at, and something like 30% of people that filled it out said LinkedIn. So that's great. That's 30% of people coming inbound are saying that they found us on a marketing channel. Fantastic. That's showing ROI of LinkedIn ads or LinkedIn organic. The second would be speak to customers. I think there's always these, this advice floating around that you should speak to X number per week. Like it's difficult to find the time to speak to customers, especially if you haven't got the budget for the tools. You've probably got a smaller team and lack of time. But try your best to speak to customers, or leverage CS to ask customers where they heard about you. It might be quite manual. It might be quite like Google Sheets, Excel based. But yeah, I think self-reported attribution and just speak to customers, see where they heard about you, see where they found you.
Have you got any examples of where you have been having budget conversations and basically the responses are just like, okay, I don't think they get it, and kind of how did you get around that? The reason why I'm asking is that I know your talking points will probably be similar to what you just said, but it'd be great to kind of talk through an example of that if you have one. If not, that's completely fine.
Yeah, probably like I said, I've been in marketing 12 years. I've made a fair few mistakes in terms of budget requests in that period where I've seen something on LinkedIn that other companies are having success with, and then I just go to my founder or CEO or VP and say, I'll try this, can I have 5K? And it's sort of like, oh, no, you can't have 5K. So it's like back to the drawing board and write a business case. I think it's it can be very, very tough to write a business case without actually any data or any proof. I think then you lean on perhaps industry trends, you lean on data that you can find online, success stories. So just trying to find as much data perhaps externally if you don't have it internally. I don't know if that sort of answers the question.
I've got an example of where I have done this, but what I've ended up doing is alienating the senior leadership in front of me, if that's a worthwhile story. So where we have been able to demonstrate ROI and been able to show them this is exactly the amount of budget that we should be spending on marketing to hit the target set. This is how much money we want to see come in from inbound. And the reality was this company wanted to spend 60 grand on marketing, but they actually needed to spend more like 300K. And then you see their faces drop and they're like, oh my God, there's no way we can spend 300K on marketing. And needless to say, they did not continue working with me. So even in the situation where you're like, that's the absolute reality, that's how their marketing's performing. That is roughly what they need to spend. It's based on their ROI. It's not based on anything crazy. Sometimes, that bad news that you might have to spend more than you were first willing to needs to be delivered in a certain way. And that certainly taught me something about how you deliver that news, because most of the time people do need more money than they're prepared to put forward. And perhaps what I could have done instead differently, had I had my time again, was to basically break down the budget a little bit further for them and to sort of see, so they could see that this was not like an upfront 300K you're going to need to spend tomorrow. This is something that's like phased across the year, that's ramping up, that your targets ramp up in line with it, that, if you're doing well and you're getting that payback, that you can then afford to spend more money on marketing. But equally, if we're not seeing the return, we're not going to spend that amount of money. So like that to me was like that was one of my fuck ups, like just being like, boom, you need to spend 300K, and them all going, no. Probably cried themselves to sleep after that conversation. So yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, I'm always surprised that the willingness to invest in a large sales function, like that, I don't know, 20 heads, we'll just increase the number of dials, 50 dials a day, we'll have 20 of them, we'll have this many demos. I've always been surprised at the willingness to double the size of a sales team versus investing in marketing. But I think, it's one of those, maybe it's when you think of, I don't know, most founders, like I'm thinking like legacy historical sort of companies, They are a bit older. Generationally, it was very, very different. It was just a case of having a massive sales team increased your sales. But yeah, I'm still surprised nowadays at how common it is where they're happy to invest a sizable amount in sales, but not marketing. And they look at 300k in marketing as upfront cost, but 300k in headcount in sales is that's a solid investment.
Fine. Yeah. I think also a lot of people have been burnt by bad marketing and bad agencies and bad consultants and all of that stuff. And it's not necessarily, I'm not saying that those are bad people that are doing that. It's just things aren't set up the way they should be, or they don't get enough budget, or the product market fit isn't right yet. They're not ready to market. Someone's micromanaging, a whole plethora of things can happen. And then a couple of those experiences I think are bad enough, because obviously as humans, we weigh negative experiences higher than equal positive experiences, where you're like, yeah, no, marketing's not for us. Like, or yeah, no, I don't want to spend, an X amount of marketing. I'll just have them just do enough, just stick around kind of thing. So I think that can happen quite a lot.
I was going to say, if you think about more often than not, the senior leaders historically have been more from the sales background, the sales function. They move up in the business, they end up being C-suite. So it's I guess it is, again, it's kind of wrong of me to assume that they understand the value of marketing when their background over the past 20 years has been mainly sales. And you think those people who have got a background mainly in sales are going to look for support and look for external resources to help them with the areas where they're not most confident. There was a CEO in the past who said to me, I've hired you because I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing in marketing. So that's why I've brought you in as an expert to do that. So I think, to your point about sort of bad quality marketing and issues with agencies and everyone being burnt, I mean, I get advertised every single day these agencies where it's basically a 23-year-old kid who's just graduated uni and is promising you 1,000 leads a month, and it's probably just some sort of AI mass outbound thing that he's doing. And you think that the chances of someone who's got a 20-year sales background in a senior leadership position to click on one of those and be like, he'll sort me out, get burnt, and then hate marketing for the rest of their career is quite high, right? Yeah, I've got a mate who works in cyber. He asked me for some advice and to just give him some advice on what they could do strategy wise. He mentioned that they had brought on a SEO agency that were only charging something like £1,000 a month, £1,500 a month, and they were saying that they were going to produce blogs, optimize. They were bringing in strategy, and I said to him, right, what on paper, like, what are the deliverables? And he was like, oh no, they're just like, they're our agency, they're going to handle SEO. And I was like, dude, 1,000, that's not even paying one person's, like, a junior. That's not even paying a junior's wage. And I think it's too often you can just go in and it's, like you said, the scope of work is just basically someone logging in, just logging in, logging out, and that's what you're getting. So ridiculously fashionable nowadays, isn't it, to these young'uns with like 1 year experience pitching agencies and stuff.
Absolutely. But this isn't an episode about shit agencies. I'm sorry I diverted us. What happens when marketing teams don't have enough budget?
So we use something internally called bow tie marketing. I mean, it's an industry, a well-known phrase. It's not a deal front thing and deal front branded thing, but bow tie marketing is essentially everything from the point of them finding out who you are, awareness, all the way through to retention. The bit in the middle of the bow tie is the conversion point, the close one. So I think when you break it down into that sort of view, underinvesting, I think if we go left to right, limited brand awareness, you're going to find it really, really difficult to compete against some of these big names. And let's be honest, C-suite and founders love to reference your competitors when they're talking to you in marketing, of like, oh, you see what they're doing? It looks great. Can we do that? And you're like, yeah, give me 5K a month and I'll do it. And they're like, no. So inability to compete, reduced top of funnel, ineffective pipeline generation, sales are going to be unhappy, poor pipeline conversion because you're not nurturing them, you're not producing any content that's going to get them sort of to the point of more trust and rapport. Therefore, you're not going to have much revenue generated by marketing, lack of customer engagement, the other side of the bow tie, lack of customer retention because you're not showing them how to use the product, whether it's playbooks or reports or guides, tutorials, academies, whatever you want to call it. Unhappy business, lack of no further investment in marketing. Everyone's unhappy. From a team perspective, lack of resources is ultimately going to lead to low morale and motivation, which, let's be honest, it doesn't take very long. One quarter of a lack of budget and you're going to be feeling pretty overwhelmed. That leads to burnout, employee retention issues. So customer retention issues, employee retention issues, failure to attract new customers. Yeah, not a happy time.
Nope. Lose for everyone. Everyone goes spend a lot on marketing.
Yeah, like we've spoken about like legacy and historic views on marketing. Let's be honest, nowadays, if you don't have at least semi-decent marketing, the whole company's job is going to be almost impossible. So, every single day we have conversations with our sales guys of that reciprocated. How can we help? What can we be doing? What's working and what's not? And you just think, like, if you were looking for a tool yourself and you're on a website and it's got no content and it's got no personal tone of voice on their social, no posts, like, that's not going to be good for sales. No, you're going to get almost no inbounds. No one's going to trust you. You're going to click on it and go, God, it looks like a dodgy company. So I think in the 2020s that we're in, as much as we joke about like marketing being involved in everything and like the overarching thing, it really is, it's part of that revenue generating function. And I think people have got to start looking at it as like a real, like an equal share between sales, customer success, or account management and marketing.
And it feels so ridiculous to hear you say that. It's like, how can it not be? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I mean, plenty of organizations that seem to be still going and still making money and not be that way. So something's happening. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, to be devil's advocate, I think, like we spoke about earlier, some marketers just shoot themselves in the foot by not reporting on the right stuff, not being able to communicate what impact they're having because they haven't tracked it, because they didn't need to maybe do that previously to be promoted and succeed and that kind of thing. So it's a bit of a shock to the system when that does come because of those things. So if you're really struggling, leave the marketing in so they can do customer retention and upsell and cross-sell, which again is not a thing that most companies go to.
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit swayed because I'm connected with a lot of marketers. I'm also connected with a lot of salespeople, but I think certainly for 2024, I've heard and seen a lot of movements within marketing functions, way more than I've seen it in sales functions in 2024. That was different in 2023, to be fair. But it has definitely found, like, even some of the companies that I looked at and I was like, I wish our marketing was as good as yours. I've seen like big downsizing in marketing teams at those places, and then it's mad. Like, their content feeds just go super quiet and you're like, who did you get rid of? Because they were clearly basically your entire function. So this, as in, if you've got no budget and C-suite unlikely to give you any, what would I do to get budget? Okay, so I think 3 steps or 3 tactics. I think the first one, this is actually based on Alistair Coursey from Cognism. I think I read for Daria for first time CMO, and there was an interesting point in that where the first time that she pitched this demand gen play, the business weren't necessarily entirely confident on it. So the first tactic is that last ditch like budget request. So okay, you're not going to get 300k, to use your 300k example. They've said no to 300k, or you're not confident you're going to get the 300k. Can you get 5k signed off? Like, realistically, for you to say 5k, which is the monthly salary of a pretty mid-level sales role nowadays, or like an AE role based out of London would be 5k a month, give or take, like salary wise. So last ditch budget request would be like, can you give me 5k fenced off for 12 months or 6 months, because it's going to take 6 to 12 months for us to prove anything, and I can do what I want with it. You've got no control over it, but you give me 5k a month for the next 6 to 12 months. So I would try that and then use that 5k to just prove like a tiny bit of the strategy, or like a dulled down version, a much like more streamlined version of it. If you can turn that 5k into 7.5k, They might give you 25k, they might give you 100k, whatever it is. So I would try that last ditch, like beg, borrow, steal, whatever you want to call it. 5k is not that much to ask for. If you can't get 5, 2.5, like 2.5k a month could be one campaign on LinkedIn, or it could be one direct mail campaign that you get 4 times return on. Build up the confidence. So that'd be number one. The second would be, I think, a pretty obvious one, which is just leverage all the free stuff you've got access to, which I think, to be honest, is a kind of non-negotiable anyway. You shouldn't be asking for budget if you're not nailing these anyway. So things like content marketing, it's basically free to write a blog. Like, okay, yes, you're probably paying for your website and your hosting, but that's already in existence. You're not asking for more budget for that. So writing blogs is free. Recording a podcast can be done like super cheaply. I mean, we're on Riverside right now, and it's like you can get it for $15 a month. That's an easy ask, or just pay for it yourself. I know you shouldn't have to do that, but $15, like it's palatable. So blogs, white papers, case studies, all stuff that's pretty easy to scale and to write. Social media, again, non-negotiable really. 1 post a day, really, really easy. It's free. It starts to build up those organic channels. Email marketing's super, super affordable, if not free. Like MailChimp, all those providers have free packages, and that's going to help you do targeted, personalized campaigns. Partnerships and co-marketing, I think, is another one where you can leverage peers, connections, mates, like other companies who are in a similar position to you, and host events together, spread the cost, that sort of stuff. All of that, like I said, I think it's kind of a non-negotiable. You should be doing that anyway, as like your BAU, like BAU underneath all the sort of projects you could be running. And then I think the third one is build trust and then build your case. So even if you can't secure the budget now, don't give up. Like, it could be next month that the winds change, the industry changes, the market changes. You have one big deal come in and they're on a high, and you might be able to get budget. So I think if you can't get budget now, do what you can to build out that reporting dashboard that I spoke about. Get as much data as you possibly can. Like the dashboard that I use just for content is like 12 sheets, and there's hundreds of metrics on there. In their own right, they don't really mean too much, but if I can give you 5 graphs that show we're going in the right direction, it's going to start to build confidence. The more time you invest in building that trust and rapport with the C-suite, and the more data you can give them, is going to help you further down the line. It's kind of that demand gen mentality of invest into building the trust and rapport, so that when you next ask for budget, they're far more likely to give you the to give you.
I think it kind of almost nicely summarizes everything we've spoken about in this podcast, just under a stressful situation. So, Jamie, have you got any marketing gossip for us? Anything that's been living rent-free in your mind, that you've seen, that's annoyed you, that you've loved, that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, do you know what? The one that I jotted down is probably just a career bugbear. Like, it's just, I think it's got better. Like, since I've moved to Dealfront, I've not experienced it. That's the good thing. But for the first 10, 11 years, it's the grass is greener syndrome. It's like it's just that poison, right? In C-suite founders' mind of like, why can't we do that? Look at those guys. Oh, it looks like they're closing so many deals. So I think there's the way it sort of has come across over the past 10 years is changing strategies like every month. So you agree something, you get budget for it, happy days, and you start it. And then after a month, they're like, oh, we haven't seen any inbounds from those LinkedIn campaigns. Can we try direct mail? And you're like, come on, like, you've got to give it like 3 to 6 months. So constantly changing strategies, overvaluing competitor stuff. So when we see competitors' activity, it's always through a rose-tinted goggles. Like, it looks amazing from the outside, but they might not have closed any deals. And if they have closed the deals, they might have a 3-year payback on those deals that they've acquired because the amount of money they're spending. Their customer retention might be horrendous. So you've only got this like outsider's view on things. Shiny object syndrome, I think that's massive, especially in the last year because of AI. And it's, oh, can't we try AI? Can't we sprinkle AI on the tool? And And I think you can, of course you can, if it's done right. Doubting the team's capabilities, again, based on the other things I've just mentioned. That's a hard one, because I think it kind of links to that micromanagement, but it's when you overvalue what competitors are doing and you assume that your team aren't doing those things because you can't see it or whatever. That's a tough one. And then I think just, unrealistic expectations of what you're going to get with budget and impatience. I think they're like the obvious ways it presents itself.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really great episode, and it's nice to hear a director of content talking about all these things, even though I know you're more of a generalist background, but that's a conversation for a whole other day. Thank you to everyone who's listening. We hope to see you on blameitonmarketing.com, and we want to thank you, Dealfront, for sponsoring us.